Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the last week of Mezo Investment Club, and today we'll finish up our final unit on government and politics and how they can possibly affect investing. So all of our meeting recordings are up on our YouTube channel, so you can always access our previous meetings through our platform. So similar to last week, today's topics are also very complex. So I'll try to touch on each of these topics as thoroughly as possible while trying to keep it as interesting and informative as possible as well. All right, so let's see. Just a quick reintroduction before we start. I'm Ryan. My team and I have set out on this mission to try to spread the importance of understanding economics, finance, and business for real-world applications. And as we try to wrap up the program today, I want you all to kind of reflect what we've discussed in the last 2 months and start to think about how you could possibly apply what you've learned in any situation in life. And as I don't know, middle and high school students, I'm guessing the chances right now are pretty low, but you never know. So today, we'll re-enter the world of public finance by talking about fiscal and monetary policy. So these two topics are actually something that you'll learn in an intro level macroeconomics class. They do build off a lot of other economic related principles that we're not able to cover. So I'll try my best to explain how these two policies work without any precursor econ knowledge. But obviously, first we should do a quick summary of what we've learned last week at the beginning of the unit. So we started off last week's discussion on government and politics by looking at the field of public finance. So in essence, public finance is the study of the role of the government in the economy, and it has three basic objectives. Number one, ensuring the efficient allocation of available resources. Number two, keeping track of the distribution of income among systems. And finally, number three, maintaining the stability of the economy. So if you ever want to go into investing, whether on your own or at a firm, you have to understand public finance and keep up to date with what the government is doing in terms of economic and financial policy. And then the second thing we discussed was the structure of government that is set in place to enact financial regulation here in the United States. The government has many channels of financial regulation, of regulation enactment rather, that each focus on different areas. The Federal Reserve, for example, is the central bank of the country and mainly focuses on maintaining economic stability. Congress is the legislative branch of the federal government and has the role of writing and passing laws. And finally, the executive branch has the role of carrying out the law with expertise. So understanding who has what responsibilities is crucial to understanding public finance. And we'll go back to the government structure today when we're discussing fiscal and monetary policy. So finally, we went over some historical examples of times when public finance and financial regulation were needed. So the Great Depression, post-World War II recovery, and the Great Recession are all unique topics of exploration that we at Mezo may look into later on down the line. But we did go over the broad strokes last week. So that's all the material we covered last week. And let's just jump into our final lesson. So in order to understand what fiscal and monetary policy are, we actually have to first understand what the economy is. So the question is, what is the economy? Well, it is a very difficult thing to define. Google, for example, defines it as the wealth and resources of a country or region, especially in terms of the production and consumption of goods and services, which I guess makes sense. Merriam-Webster defines the economy as the structure or conditions of economic life in a country, area, or period. However, Investopedia's definition of the economy really takes the cake. It says that an economy is the large set of interrelated production and consumption activities that aid in determining how scarce resources are allocated. Now, these are all valid, if not convoluted definitions of what an economy is, but I'll try to provide a more simple, easy to understand definition. So to put it in the most simple terms, the economy can really just be defined as the system that determines the allocation of scarce resources. So let's break this definition down piece by piece. So allocation is simply the process of distribution. In this case, the economy is distributing scarce resources. So then what are scarce resources? Well, resources in this context is any asset that has use. Trees, water, cows are all types of resources because they are assets that have a variety of different uses. So then scarce resources means that there are a limited level there are a limited level of resources and an unlimited level of wants. So if there were unlimited resources, then we wouldn't really need economics because there would be no incentive to maximize the efficiency of how we allocate resources and an unlimited level because it doesn't really matter how much we waste if there are unlimited resources. Unfortunately, though, we live in a world where resources are limited and wants are unlimited. So therefore, we need an economy to determine the allocation of these scarce resources. So economic policies like fiscal and monetary policy are all about improving the health of the economy. So now that we have a basic picture of what the economy is, we also need to look at what the health of an economy is. So if the economy is all about allocating scarce resources, then a healthy economy is able to allocate those scarce resources as efficiently as possible. So by this logic, an unhealthy economy is one that is inefficient in the allocation of scarce resources. Uh, Billions upon billions of economic transactions are happening each day. So there's really no way to properly monitor the total health of the economy. So to bypass this issue, economists use numerous metrics that look at different aspects of the economy to try to determine its overall health. So let's take a look at some of the most popular economic health indicators. So the most well-known indicator is GDP, gross domestic product. It is essentially the market value of all goods and services produced in a nation during a specific time period. So GDP measures a society's wealth by indicating how fast profits may grow and the expected return on capital. And the technical definition of a recession is actually 2 consecutive quarters of a decline in GDP. So the technical definition of a recession actually relies on one of our major economic health indicators for economists to go on. So another well-known indicator is the inflation rate. So inflation in general is the rise in level of prices where a unit of currency, such as the US dollar, effectively buys less than it did in prior periods. So ideally, an optimal level of inflation is required to promote spending to a certain extent rather than saving, thereby nurturing economic growth. This is mainly because if you know that you can buy more with today's money than you can tomorrow, then you'll be more incentivized to buy today and increase transactions within the economy. So inflation is usually measured through the Consumer Price Index, also known as the CPI, which is a sampling of several hundred goods and services that the average consumer may buy. And the CPI measures the changes in the prices paid for the sampling of goods and services to basically provide a gauge on the overall inflation rate of the economy. And basically what you want is a little bit of inflation, around 2 to 3% each year. You don't want too much, and you don't want the opposite either. You don't want deflation because that's also a terrible thing to have. And then another important economic indicator is the unemployment rate. And this is basically the percent of the labor force that is jobless. So when the economy is unhealthy and jobs are scarce, the unemployment rate can be expected to rise. And when the economy is growing at a healthy rate and jobs are relatively plentiful, it can be expected to fall. So there's a lot more to discuss about the unemployment rate and the various definitions and derivations of unemployment. But it is a general rule of thumb that lower unemployment is a good indicator of a healthy economy. Currently, the unemployment rate not doing too well, mainly because of the coronavirus pandemic. So one final economic indicator that we'll cover, because most of you all should probably know this by now, is the S&P 500 stock index. So if you remember from earlier, market indexes are hypothetical portfolios of investment holdings that represent a segment of the financial market. So the S&P 500 index is a market value weighted index of 500 publicly owned stocks that are combined into one equity basket. So this basket of stocks has become the industry standard and benchmark for the overall performance of the US equity market. And it can be used as a measure of the nation's stock of capital, as well as a gauge on the future business and consumer confidence levels. So growth of the S&P 500 can translate into growth of business investment, whereas the declining S&P 500 index can signal a tightening of belts for both businesses and consumers. I will say, though, that economic indicators that rely on the stock market aren't always the best, mainly because, here's an example. Currently, stock market indexes are actually doing really well right now. A lot of them, for example, NASDAQ has actually hit record highs ever since its drop in March at the beginning of the pandemic. Unfortunately, the rest of the country isn't doing too well. So sometimes um, it's good to understand that the economy can't always be indicated by the stock market. So even if the stock market's doing good, it doesn't mean that the economy is doing well. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. So now that we've looked at what an economy is and the indicators that help gauge its health, we can start looking at economic policy. So economic policy, like financial regulation, is part of the overall study of public finance, and it can be defined as a course of action enacted by the government intended to influence or control the behavior of the economy. So fiscal and monetary policy both fall under the category of economic policy, and both have the overarching goal of trying to improve the health of the economy. So these two types of economic policy essentially act as levers on different aspects of the economy with the hope of exerting a positive influence on the overall economy. So in the US, fiscal policy is enacted by, as you can see, the legislative and executive branch of the government, whereas monetary policy is enacted by the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank for the United States. So let's first take a look at fiscal policy in greater detail, and then we'll look at monetary policy. So fiscal policy is essentially the use of government spending and tax policies to influence the economy. It tries to exert a positive influence on aggregate demand for goods and services, employment, inflation, and overall economic growth. All those health indicators that we talked about earlier. So in economics, there is this idea of the business cycle. It's a macroeconomic phenomenon that is marked by the alternation of phases of expansion and contraction in aggregate economic activity. So a typical business cycle consists of expansions occurring at around the same time in many economic activities, followed by a similarly general recession. So as you can see here, here's a chart of the business cycle. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it's the graph on the left. It's basically showing, expansions, contractions, expansions, and contractions. So what causes the business cycle? Well, it is a complicated issue in economics that is still being debated. What you do need to know is that fiscal and monetary policy both are government tools that try to stabilize the business cycle and regulate economic output as much as possible. So they're trying to basically, fiscal and monetary policy are basically trying to flatten this into a line rather than a sine wave. But currently it is a sine wave, and it is causing a lot of distress, especially right now. So let's see. Fiscal policy basically tries to flatten the business cycle by adjusting spending and tax policies to make up for the shortfalls of the private sector. So to understand how fiscal policy works, let's consider an economy that is experiencing a recession. So a time in which, by the way, a recession is also basically when the economy is unhealthy. And here, this trough right here would represent a recession. So this is when the government would try to conduct what is called expansionary fiscal policy. So in line with this, the government would try to, perhaps issue tax cuts or tax stimulus rebates, which are partial refunds on taxes that people have already paid. And the logic behind this is that when people pay lower taxes, they have more money to spend or invest, which would fuel higher demand. So that demand leads firms to hire more, which decreases unemployment, and for firms to compete more fiercely for labor. In turn, this serves to raise wages and provide consumers with more income to spend and invest. So it's a positive feedback loop if expansionary fiscal policy works. And another possible method within expansionary fiscal policy is that the government itself can actually increase spending, possibly through building more highways, investing in public works projects like the Hoover Dam. This government activity could also increase unemployment, pushing up demand and growth. This government activity could increase employment, which would further push up demand and growth. And a downside to expansionary fiscal policy is that it is usually characterized by deficit spending, which is what happens when the government spends more than its budget. So in practice, deficit spending tends to result from a combination of tax cuts and higher spending. So this means that the government is, you know, they're spending more money than they could afford, and that's usually not a good thing. Um, Over the years, the government has spent a lot more than what they can afford. That's why we have such a high national debt, but that's a whole nother issue. So conversely, the government may try to conduct contractionary fiscal policy when the economy is overheating. So an overheating economy is indicated by, say, like mounting inflation, where economic growth is unsustainable and could like collapse in a very, very bad way. And the government might try to induce a brief recession in order to restore balance to the economic cycle, kind of like trying to uh, pop a bubble before it grows and bursts even worse. So it can try to do this by increasing taxes, reducing public spending, and cutting public sector pay or jobs. So where expansionary fiscal policy involves deficits, contractionary fiscal policy is characterized by budget surpluses. So this means that the government is spending less than they're getting. So which means that they have surpluses that they can maybe use later on. This budget surpluses in reality usually never happen because this policy is rarely used because it is hugely unpopular politically. Um, Public policymakers thus really face a major asymmetry in their incentives to engage in expansionary or contractionary fiscal policy because nobody really wants to be the government that raises taxes and reduces the wages of public sector jobs, but it has to be done. So this is just another reason why we have to separate politics from economics. And we actually talked about some really good examples of expansionary fiscal policy last week when discussing historical examples. We just never, called them examples of expansionary fiscal policy. So, like the New Deal during the Great Depression, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act during the Great Recession, and even the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, during the current pandemic are also excellent examples of fiscal policy during times of troubled economy. So, whereas fiscal policy is enacted by the legislative and executive branch, monetary policy is enacted by the central bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve. So, in essence, monetary policy refers to the actions undertaken to control money supply to achieve the goal of stabilizing the business cycle and regulating economic output, just like fiscal policy. But compared to fiscal policy, though, monetary policy is a bit more complex and it has a lot more intricate components to it. So I won't be able to I won't be able to thoroughly discuss it all today. However, I would want to focus on the foundation and start talking about the basics of expansionary and contractionary monetary policy. So let's first take a look at expansionary monetary policy. So if a country is facing a high unemployment rate during a slowdown or recession, the Federal Reserve can opt for an expansionary policy aimed at increasing economic growth and expanding economic activity. So as a part of expansionary monetary policy, the Federal Reserve often lowers the interest rates through various measures that make money saving relatively unfavorable and promotes spending. Because you have lower interest rates, if you put stuff in the bank, if you put money in the bank, the lower interest rates means that you're not going to have, it's not going to be worth as much once you try to take it out. So this leads to an increased money supply in the market with the hopes of boosting investment in consumer spending. Lower interest rates mean that the businesses and individuals can take loans on convenient terms to expand productive activities and spend more on big ticket consumer goods. An example of this expansionary approach is the low to zero interest rates maintained by many leading economies across the globe since the 2008 financial crisis. Currently, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Federal Reserve has actually kept interest rates close to zero in hopes to stimulating economic growth. So when the economy is overheating, however, the Federal Reserve will try to enact contractionary monetary policy. Basically, increased money supply can lead to higher inflation, raising the cost of living and cost of doing business to the point where economic conditions seriously decline. So contractionary monetary policy, by increasing interest rates and slowing the growth of the of the money supply, rather, aims to bring down inflation. So this can slow economic growth and increase unemployment, but is often required to tame inflation. Because inflation is something that you seriously have to control, even though it might come to the cost of unemployment. There are times when you do not want hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is a terrible scenario that you never want your country to go through. And we might look at some historical examples of hyperinflation later on in perhaps some of our videos that we might put out later on, or even some of our future programs. So in the early 1980s, here's an example, when inflation hit record highs and was hovering in the double-digit range of around 15%, the Federal Reserve raised its benchmark interest rate to a record 20%. So though the high rates resulted in a recession, it managed to bring back down the inflation to a desired range of around 3 to 4% over the next few years. All right, so that's basically all I have for fiscal and monetary policy. Now we're going to do a Kahoot and see how you guys do and what you guys have learned. Oh, also, you guys can go. All right, I think we can start. And can you guys hear me? All right, here we go. Oh, also, before we start, are there any questions regarding today's presentation? I mean, because there are, we covered a lot of really interesting topics, but they are quite intricate and quite complex, and really build on a lot of other previous economic ideas. So if there's any questions, let me know now, or you can always ask me later, or you can also email me, whatever works for you. All right, then let's start. Question 1. Which of these government entities does not enact financial regulation? All right, good. Yes, the military does not enact financial regulation. Hopefully it never will have to. Yeah, all the other three are all major players within public finance. All right, question 2. What happened in September 1929 in the financial world? All right, yeah, most of you guys got this one. Yeah, in September 1929, there was the collapse of the stock market, which was one of the, as we talked about, one of the potential causes of the Great Depression. All right, question 3. What is the system that determines the allocation of scarce resources? the economy is the system that determines the allocation of scarce resources. It's good that most of you guys got this one. All right, question 4. The health of an economy can be gauged by what metric? So one of these is one of the economic health metrics that we talked about. All right, good. Most of you guys got this. Actually, all of you guys got this one. Yes, the gross domestic product is one of the many metrics in which the health of the economy can be gauged. Question 5. Fiscal policy is dictated by the legislative in what branch? All right, yeah. Fiscal policy is dictated by the legislative and executive branch. In terms of those who did not get the right answer, maybe it's time to relearn some civics. Not sure what grade you guys are in, so don't worry about it, at least for now. All right, true or false? Fiscal policy uses government spending and tax policies to influence the economy. All right, yeah. Most of you guys got this one. Fiscal policy does use government spending and tax policies to influence the economy. In fact, it is the definition of fiscal policy. All right, question 7. Expansionary fiscal policy is usually enacted during what time? Whoa, okay. So, yes, expansionary fiscal policy is usually enacted during economic downturn because when the economy is down, when there's a recession or when there's depression, that is the time when you want to expand. That is the time when you want expansionary fiscal policy, possibly expansionary monetary policy. The two different types of policies working in conjunction. So there's that. All right, question 8. Contractionary fiscal policy can involve which of the following? I think this one is a bit more, I think you need to think a bit more about this one. Okay, so there's a lot to discuss. Contractionary fiscal policy usually involves increase in taxes. Can anyone explain why? Or at least the two people that might have gotten it right. All right, I guess not. So a decrease in taxes and an increase in government spending are all part of expansionary fiscal policy because expansionary fiscal policy is all about trying to increase demand. It's all about trying to give people more money, try to increase spending. So by decreasing taxes, it basically gives people more money because they don't have to pay as much taxes. Increasing government spending means that the government itself is also doing a lot of spending. So with the consumer spending and the government spending more, a decrease in taxes and an increase in government spending are both expansionary policies. Now, one person picked increase in interest rates. So interest rates is all about an increase in interest rates is contractionary policy. However, it is contractionary monetary policy. Fiscal policy is only about taxes and government spending. Does that make sense to all? These are pretty these are like major econ topics. So like I wouldn't expect you all to like get it right away. But all right. Let's see. Question 9, true or false? Monetary policy is mainly controlled by the president. All right, yeah, most of you all got it. Yeah, this is false. Does anyone know uh, what entity controls monetary policy? Well, a specific type of bank, you know. Yes, the central bank. So uh, is um, the central bank is the one that controls monetary policy. Within this country, the central bank is called uh, the Federal Reserve. Um, in the European Union, where they have the euro, it's the Euro Bank. And yeah, all right. True or false? The Federal Reserve is the top investment bank in the United States. Wow. Okay. So only two people got it right. I guess this question did trip you all up a bit. So the Federal Reserve is not the top investment bank in the United States. It is, in fact, the central bank of the United States. So if you remember from, I believe, 2 weeks ago, when we talked about the banking industry, we talked about retail banks, commercial banks, and investment banks. And investment banks basically are like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. They serve as basically financial intermediaries between corporations and the financial market. Um, they're all about making money. They're about it's basically if you're smart and you want to go into finance and you want to make a lot of money, you want to go into an investment bank. Um, However, the Federal Reserve is, as Anna talked about, the central bank of the United States. So the central bank is all about trying to maintain economic stability. So there's that. All right, question 11. Monetary policy has control over what aspect in public finance? All right, yeah. So monetary policy, it's all about the interest rates. Taxes and government spending uh, is um, is controlled by fiscal policy. Financial regulation is an entirely other topic. All right, true or false? Expansionary monetary policy can involve the lowering of interest rates. All right, good. Yeah, most of you guys got it. This is true. So expansionary monetary policy usually involves the lowering of interest rates, which means lower interest rates means that I'm less inclined to put my money in a bank because the bank isn't going to offer as much because they're going to have lower interest rates. So instead, I'm not going to be saving as much. I'm going to be spending more. Uh, and in addition, I also might be more inclined to take out loans because of the low interest rates. So I wouldn't have to pay back as much when I'm taking out a loan. So maybe I can take out a mortgage and buy a house. Maybe I can take out an auto loan and buy a car. And all these activities of spending, buying a house, buying a car, is all about it's all stimulating the economy. It's all economic. It's all economic activity, and that's good for the economy, especially during a time of economic downturn. So that's when you want expansionary monetary policy. All right, question 13. What are the current target interest rates set by the Federal Reserve? And now think about what is happening as of right now, and then I think you all will have a general idea of what the interest rates might be. Whoa. Okay. So I did talk about how currently the Federal Reserve has the current target interest rates set to very close, if not exactly to 0%. And this is like I said earlier. lowering interest rates, just trying to increase as much um, as much consumer spending, as much credit borrowing as possible. And I think a lot of European banks actually, uh, not European banks, I think the European Bank and a few other areas, a few other central banks across the world actually have negative interest rates. But that is a whole nother topic of discussion. All right, question 14. Contractionary monetary policy promotes what? And this is something I talked about earlier. All right, good. Yeah, most of y'all got it. Contractionary monetary policy promotes money saving. So with contractionary monetary policy, are interest rates going to be raised or lowered? Can someone answer in the chat? Yes, exactly. Interest rates are going to be raised. This means that I'm going to be more inclined to put my money in the bank because they're going to have higher interest rates. I'm going to have more money by the time I take it out. Also, I'm not going to be more. I'm not going to want to take out a loan anymore because the mortgage that I wanted to take out maybe it has too high of an interest rate now. So contractionary monetary policy is all about reducing economic activity, trying to slow down the economy when the economy is overheating. This is very good. All right, final question. Who is the current chairman of the Federal Reserve? All right, good. Yes. The current chairman of the Federal Reserve is Jerome Powell. I think it's really good that you all learned that by now. I've actually asked this in a lot of Kahoots, and it's good that you all know this. All right, let's look at the results. All right, congrats to our three winners, and congrats to everyone for participating. Go back. Let's see. Oh, and yeah, by the way, here's guess we can. Oh yeah, here's the stock market game, and here are the final rankings. And here, let me stop share, and let me open my video. So I want to thank you all for coming for these last few weeks. It's been a pleasure teaching you, and it's been a really cool experience developing the program with my team and seeing you all progress as you start learning more about investing, the financial world, and all that. And I think that let's see, Mezo is working on a few things in the future. We actually have something coming up late August. Alex, do you want to talk about that a bit? It's about, I think, how the college admission process works and how in college financial aid. Alex, you there? All right, I guess he is not. Anyways, yeah. So we have that coming up. I believe we're inviting a few U of M staff to especially talk about how the admission process works, how you want to start working your way towards developing that mindset for thinking about college. And I think it would be a really interesting experience. So if you want to do that, just keep looking at our website. We're going to be updating it as much as we possibly can. And yeah, we'll go off from there. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you all have a great weekend, and take care.